Hello, welcome to the Rogue Council. Episode something. I've lost track. It's fine. Today we're going to be talking about Solo, a Star Wars story, the second a Star Wars story film in the saga, brief saga of a Star Wars story films. And we're joined with our co-hosts Xanatos1138 or David and Higo27 Roddy, and our guest, our second ever or second panel of guests, which is Star Wars Lawyer. So Star Wars Lawyer, introduce yourself. Why don't you?
Hello, what have we here? My name is Chris, aka Star Wars Lawyer. I'm a cosplayer, uh, lore. I wouldn't say I'm a lore master. I'm proficient. I would say I'm proficient in Star Wars lore, and an actual lawyer. Yeah.
It's hard to beat the username when you are a lawyer.
Yeah, that's. I think during like the first few months I was on TikTok, that was the number one question I got asked. They're like, "Are you a real lawyer?" Yes.
I have to ask because I've known you for a little while now. How often do people love to challenge you on social media on law topics when they clearly know nothing?
So the only example I can think of really was when Justice Coney Barrett was being brought up for her confirmation process. And I wasn't looking at it from a partisan perspective. I was looking at purely like the qualifications of like what her what her background was. And so she was a professor at Notre Dame for a while. Notre Dame's a good law school. She had been a judge for a little bit and she did private practice. But at that time in my career, I hadn't done as much private practice as her. At this time in my career, I've already done more private practice than her. So I was just saying things like that. And this one guy wasn't my friend, but he was just like, well, what legal training do you have? What illegal expertise do you have that you can say such things? And I'm like, I'm an attorney. And then immediately the goalpost started moving. He's like, oh, well, how many cases have you presided over? How long have you been judge? I was like, all right.
It's like no matter where we move the goalpost, I'm ahead of you.
Yeah.
uh, God, I couldn't imagine because I'm not even like a pilot, but I still get people questioning me on stuff that I'm like, what? What? um, but yeah, so let's go kind of around. Higo27, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Roddy, Higo27 on YouTube, and I have a few TikToks at HigoDamask27. I don't have much to say about myself other than check out my videos on YouTube if you want to. And it does seem to be that way, Star Wars Lawyer. Like, nothing is ever good enough for people when they're, like, insufferable critics of everything
Mhm.
around them. So, I mean, you just can't win with
Yeah.
that. So, anyway,
And-
hi. Yeah, I just watched Solo. I'm excited for this episode.
Yes, I am too. And last but not least, Xanatos1038.
I am Xanatos1138 on pretty much anywhere there's social media, also known as David. I don't really have anything else. I do Star Wars content on TikTok mostly.
Nice. I'm the same. Forward into the black pretty much everywhere. I mostly nowadays just talk about how much I need Rogue Squadron today. It needs to be out now. But let's kind of let's start off with like kind of like an icebreaker question. In the theme of Solo, a Star Wars story, the story that dug deep into Han Solo of the original trilogy. What is the next character you want to see expanded on in a film or a TV show that we don't already have planned, like Kenobi and Ahsoka, excluded from this?
Also, Lando.
Lando, yeah, we do have a Lando show coming, so we can't include Lando. But Roddy, I'll start with you. Who's one character you'd like to see get a new, fleshed out story, whether it's a TV show or a movie?
TV show or movie, I'd be fine with either. Very specific and very unlikely. Kreia and her height of conflict with Atris in the Jedi Order.
If we get our dream of KOTOR remake making it into canon, that could potentially, let's say, 15 years from now,
Yeah, exactly. That is
Uh,
my answer, though. That is my answer.
nice. David, how about you?
I'm actually on the same vein. I would like canon Revan information.
Okay. Like a Revan show, Revan movie. I would.
Yeah, like whatever they want to do, making it canon, I'm good. That's good.
I'd be into it as long as it made all the fanboys upset.
Yes. Yes, I am on board with that.
Well, because isn't
Uh,
Revan one of the most toxic fanboyed characters?
Oh yeah.
Unfortunately, yes.
Interesting character in what Drew Karpyshyn would consider to be the canon version of Revan is a very interesting character, but what he has become, like he's very much like Starkiller at this point. Or I guess Starkiller is more like Revan, depending on the timeline you look at.
Yeah, what's wild to me was before I really started getting into, like the Star Wars internet, like, when around the time the sequels were coming out, most of my friends didn't really care about like Revan.
Mhm.
Like we all thought Starkiller was cool because like, oh, like look what he did with the Star Destroyer, right? Like, we were, but no one was just like, oh yeah, that's my favorite character. If you don't know who he is, people were just like, oh yeah, no, Luke, Han, Anakin, Obi-Wan, Padme. Like they were just doing the
Mhm.
characters from the movies, or occasionally like Thrawn from the Zahn novels. So I was just like, and then I get on TikTok and everybody's like, you don't know Revan? Gatekeep. I was like, I don't lecture me about the deep magic. I was there when it was written.
It is. I had a similar experience kind of hopping onto like Star Wars TikTok and Star Wars like that social media at large of like, I thought I was weird for playing those games all the time. And now you're all in love with the guy that is literally a blank slate. He's the Bella of Twilight for Star Wars. Like he is like, insert yourself
That's
here.
funny.
And the same thing with Lego Star Wars. I didn't know that was a whole thing on its own. I did not realize that Lego Star Wars was like a fandom in itself. But Chris, what is the one character you want to see expanded on? Sans Land.
I feel like I have to stay on brand and say Finn. I want more Finn content. Give me Finn leading a stormtrooper rebellion. Give me Jedi Finn. I'll take all of the above, but also Janna, if because I feel like Finn is coming, but Janna, like we know next to nothing about her, but she also defected. Like I want to see that like played out in a book or a comic. There's a lot of potential in the sequel trilogy for post sequel content, and even like some stuff during or before it that we need. I can't wait for us to get to.
Yeah, I was going through for like the shout out to the Podwans podcast trivia that's going on now. I guess it's airing in the next couple of days. I was helping them with some questions, and I was going through Rise of Skywalker and like was just doing some stuff to look at some ships and stuff like that. And like obviously Jan is like a huge part of that big battle, and I'm like, this is a really cool character that needs a little bit more fleshing out. So yeah, I would be excited for that. For me, it's Tali Lintra from The Last Jedi. I want to see her fighting with Poe Dameron nonstop every day, like over breakfast.
Is she a Poe's?
She's
Poe's ex-smuggler friend.
No, that's Zori Bliss. Tali is the A-wing pilot from The Last Jedi that she's just like chilling in her cockpit in the hangar when Kylo blows the hangar up. And it's just one of the things like,
I have no clue who that is.
Yeah, she's a teeny tiny character that gets mentioned a lot. She showed up in the Poe Dameron comics, I believe, a little bit. And she has an interesting story. She has a sister, Tali Lintra, that also is like dead because like Poe is responsible indirectly for a lot of people's deaths, which I would love to see expanded on. Of like, yeah, Poe, you're kind of a jerk and cause a lot of people to die. But yeah,
are you referencing Last Jedi?
All of it,
or other things too?
Yeah,
all of it, all his existence.
His existence is literally people dying around him, and because he's an arrogant jerk sometimes. I love Poe Dameron. But yeah, so we'll jump into the movie, but I just kind of want to know, we'll do a roundtable. How did you feel about this movie? I'm going to say when it came out, because it's one of the freshest Star Wars movies that we have. And how did you feel on your most recent watch through? And David, I'll start with you.
So when I first watched it, I was surrounded by a lot of YouTube opinions, and what I mean by that is like a lot of people hated on like L3 and Lando's portrayal, like a bunch of stuff. And once I got away from that, and the more I watch it, it's a really enjoyable film.
Alrighty, how about you?
I've been very neutral at first. I was like, Solo's great. I don't really like it that much, but it's good. And now I like it a lot, actually.
Yes.
And what the reasons will be evident when we talk about it.
I was kind of in the same vein. When I first saw it in the theaters, I was like, this was fun. I enjoyed this. Definitely not a favorite, but every time I watch it, I like it, like not a little bit more, a lot more every time I watch it. But yeah, Chris, I believe you kind of maybe have a polarizing opinion, if I'm not mistaken, on this film. So where were you when you first came out, and where were you on your most recent watch through?
So so before the movie came out, before I saw it, like when I was seeing the trailers, and I was like, I'm a huge Donald Glover fan, him as an actor, comedian, and a musician. So when they cast him as Lando, I was like, awesome. And so at that point, I was like, I'm going to see it for him. And then if I need a secondary reason, it's for Emilia Clarke. And so going into the movie, I was like, those are my two reasons. And so I went in, loved the both of them. Everything else kind of I felt was lacking. I needed less in some areas and more from others, like Beckett's crew. I wanted more of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were gone in 5 minutes. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, and so upon my most recent rewatch, which was a couple months ago, I sort of feel the same way. Like I see where, like people enjoying it and where it's fun, and like no problem with that. Like, Star Wars heist film, so much gold mine.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think this would have been a better, like a Lando film, because I don't think we needed a Han Solo origin story. And I look at Rogue One and Solo in the same category. They're both unnecessary movies, but I love Rogue One and I don't love Solo.
That's fair. I definitely agree with you on the fact. I think that if this movie focused around Lando and not Han, I do like what they do with Han in this movie, and I love what they do with Lando in this movie. But yeah, if the movie were like Lando, a Star Wars story, I think it could have been potentially a more interesting movie. But I will say, first and foremost, I think this is the most fun Star Wars movie of them all. It's just a good time. But we'll get into a lot of it. So let's just kind of jump into it with the opening title, which we don't get a title crawl. We just kind of get like a very typical fantasy sci-fi blurb before the movie starts, and then immediately into a chase scene. So the movie kind of just starts off with a bang, and we're on Corellia. And what I think is super cool is we start seeing the stuff we've seen from the books, like that we saw with the X-Wing books, we saw with, Heir to the Empire, we, all the stuff with Incom and Quad Drive Yards and Sinar systems. We see these like where it was in real life, and we see like a Star Destroyer being halfway assembled and the bridge being lifted up into the atmosphere. And I'm like, this is like I think a really cool opening, like atmospheric thing, and it's like it's all through a chase scene. So I think that's a really interesting part, the way they decided to start it, and it's just a very intense chase scene, and then it just pans up to Solo, a Star Wars story, and you're like, okay. And one thing I'll say is this movie, until the end, is always in motion. It doesn't stop until we get to the end. I think that's an interesting thing. Does anyone have anything about like just the opening of the movie, the initial chase scene before he kind of goes into like the sewer undercity of Corellia?
I do like the transition. A couple words in the opening text always stick out to me when it says "in these mean streets." I'm like, that's really tacky, but it's also very Star Wars.
Yeah.
But then it cuts right into him hot wiring the cars. Like that is a great shift. It's like right into it.
the hot wiring lighting alone is really cool. Of just like it's black screen and then a spark, and you see just the inner workings of a speeder, and then a spark. And I was like, okay, this is a cool shot. But yeah, we kind of move on from that into like the streets of Corellia, or the Undercity, where Han's going to meet Kira, who is the love interest slash here some parts, not there some parts, companion in the movie. And I think what's interesting is we have the story of Corellia. We know what Corellia is from the books, the comics, the games. It's mentioned, Han said, "Oh, I grew up in Corellia." In the original trilogy, they mentioned Coronet, which is really cool for me, and I think David as well, as we spend a lot of time in Coronet and Star Wars Galaxies. But what I think is so interesting is this is the place where they make all of the starships you basically see in the entire franchise. So it's obviously a very wealthy planet. It has all the money piling into it, but you see it's dirty, it's dingy, everyone is in poverty, and you see this huge corporate wealth disparity. That there's so much money. Like the Empire is here building their Star Destroyers, and there's kids living in the sewers. So I think that's an interesting thing about this movie and how they set it up with these like little kind of like socioeconomic political tidbits. And also with the prevalence of coaxium in this movie, the only thing I could think of while watching this is like, this is a movie about people owing other people gas money. Like it is literally, hey, where's my gas money? Because it's like all about like, oh yeah, we've got to get coaxium for them. You got to pay me for the coaxium you lost, or it's like, yeah,
it's gas money, mind warfare, and power differentials.
It's an interesting thing, but I think the movie does it really well.
I know that after this movie and The Last Jedi, I was just like, I'm tired of hearing about fuel in Star Wars. I need a break.
Solo was like their answer to people complaining about The Last Jedi, and the fuel was like, all right, we're gonna make a whole movie about fuel.
Yeah,
that's it.
There's a movie called
You guys need free energy. Come on.
Yeah. It's one of those things that a couple people brought stuff. There's a movie called Children of Men, which is based off of a very good book. And I've always loved the movie. I love the book, but then someone told me, watch it again and just think the whole time it's Clive Owen's quest for a good pair of shoes. And I was like, what? And it's like in the movie multiple times, like almost a dozen times, he rips his shoes open and he is like walking around in socks, and he finds like an empty pair of shoes. He's like, oh, good, great. And he just puts them on. And I'm like, it's a hilarious way to look at that movie. And the same thing with this. It was like, Han just needs gas money. That's all. But yeah, so we kind of move. Yeah, we kind of move away from the streets. Han and Kira are kind of chased by what I assume is like a militant part of Corsac, but also like a gang, like thugs of a gang type deal, like your henchmen. And then they make it to the person that you hear kind of being whispered in the streets of Corellia. You meet Lady Proxima, which, if you go on certain parts of the internet, is a thirst trap for a lot of people.
I
did not know that.
I mean,
oh yeah,
you know what? That shouldn't surprise me. Rule 34.
Nothing should surprise you in Star Wars. Yeah. I love
Jabba,
Lady Proxima. Yeah, Jabba. The Hutts have their own special section of the internet for good old times. But I think Lady Proxima is really cool. I love it. To me,
you know what species she is?
I don't think we do.
Yes, she's
aquatic of some sort.
She's a Grindelid.
Grindelid.
Yeah,
it's a good name.
She makes a small appearance in the High Republic too, right? That I think.
No. Yes. Technically, I think she's born around the time of the High Republic, but like her siblings are present in the High Republic.
Okay. One thing I noticed about Proxima, kind of watching it this time, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it's very possible I am. she is one of like since Jabba the Hutt, she is like one of the few sentient like non-humanoid aliens that we see. Like we get, I think the closest we got was maybe like the Geonosians. It's like they're just bugs.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like really weird aliens, I think Lady Proxima like really is just like this very strange, very alien creature that inhabits Star Wars and is sentient and is like also a crime lord. Which I guess if you don't look like a human, you have to be a crime lord.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I remember when I saw this in the theater, I really did like Lady Proxima. I thought she was super cool, and I did love the antics that Han pulls with Lady Proxima, especially with the rock. And it's like, oh, I got a thermal detonator, and she's like, "You just made that noise with your mouth." I love that interaction, and it obviously leads to another chase. Does anyone have like any like thoughts on Proxima or just the streets of Corellia in general?
So
Go
Sorry,
ahead,
go-
David.
go ahead. One small thing I noticed, and both times watching it recently, when he throws the rock, not only Proxima is affected by the sunlight, but her like right hand man with the sun visor thing.
Yeah, it
I was
shoots
like,
down.
who is that guy that he's affected by sunlight too?
All I could think of is the female end of the species is worm-like, and the male part of the species is bipedal, which
Maybe.
leads me to probably understand why the internet, certain parts of the internet, are very curious as to how this
Yeah,
species.
maybe they're inner like subterranean life forms or something,
Yeah.
and
So-
the light hurts them.
So so you learned this very quickly in the High Republic because there is a
Okay.
character that is a Grindelid, and so yes, so they are subterranean, and so they only come out at night. Otherwise, they're underground, and so when they do get into the sunlight, they turn to dust.
I remember that.
Whoa.
Okay, now it's all connecting. I remember that part.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so I think that whoever that right hand man was has just pretty much just been chilling with Proxima underground and only comes out at night, so that when the sun comes up, he's like, "Well, I like my eyesight."
But yeah, I love that character. I love that she's a unique character, and I think we've been getting a little bit more of that since then. I think we got it definitely with Mandalorian. We got it with Book of Boba Fett. We got it with the big, strong, six-armed boy in Boba Fett. That I don't think we got a name for him. I think he was just like the Titan or something like that.
I think people started calling him Dan.
That's a good name. He looks like a Dan. But yeah, so Kira and Han make their way out of Proxima's lair. And we are like 15 minutes and we get our second chase scene in this film. And it ends very poorly with Han trying to do a really dangerous stunt that doesn't end well. And I love when any movie does this, because it's always a thing in all the movies in the history of like movies. All the cool stunts always go super well, and it's this amazing shot of like a car jumping over a bridge and stuff like that, and it lands. And it's like, I love when like he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna turn the car sideways and shoot the thing," and then it just stops. And I'm like, yes, because like that's what would happen to me if I tried to do this. But yeah, they kind of make a run for it through into an Imperial checkpoint into the Coronet spaceport. To basically get away. They're taking the coaxium vial that they have that they say at the beginning of the movie is worth 500 credits. And by the end of the movie, he tries to sell it for, I believe, 20,000 credits. And I'm like, God, I like Han. I like Han in this movie. And the one thing that I think is really interesting that we see once they kind of get to the Coronet spaceport, like the customs area, basically, is we see these stormtroopers, the Imperial stormtroopers, detaining innocent civilians that are just going basically to the airport and searching them for no given reasons, and it does make them feel very dangerous and very stormtrooper, as their name comes from. And I think it's such an interesting way that they kind of choose to demonstrate that, because I feel like a lot of times we do see the stormtroopers just moving in formation, but we don't really see, and they're, they shoot at the heroes, but we don't ever see how they really interact with random people that often. And I think this instance is very interesting in how they're interacting with just regular civilians. Any thoughts on?
It brought to light more of the totalitarian aspect of it all.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting comparing that
slavery of all the citizens there.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting comparing the timeline of where we are in Solo versus like in the Bad Batch, where you see people like willingly line up for, the Imperial and like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. All this. And then you just see this is more reluctant. I mean, even the cinematography, like this is a more darker, more dreary kind of feeling, whereas in the Bad Batch, the colors are more light and yellow and just sort of, even though we all know what's going on, they're just like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, even going back,
they're still believing Palpatine's lie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even just like in Revenge of the Sith, we see, the whole Senate is like, yeah, Galactic Empire, this makes sense, this is great, let's do it. So it's very interesting. And then we kind of Kira and Han become separated. They're basically bribing an Imperial security checkpoint guard with the coaxium, and there's a back and forth exchange between the two to get them through the checkpoint without any identification. And they're walking through, Han gets through, and Kira is pulled back by Proxima's guards, or potentially Corsac, whoever it is. And they are separated. There's a moment of Han slamming on the gates, like, I'll come back. And we do see, this is a stark contrast to who we see in the original trilogy. This is, Han in the original trilogy doesn't care. And we definitely build on this in this movie, but it's so interesting that he wants to give up everything to help this one person. And I think it's interesting where he starts, and then obviously where he kind of ends up in the original trilogy. But then we switch over to him basically trying to get out, and his only option is, I'll just join the Empire, and that'll get me to become a pilot, and they'll be able to get a ship. And the Imperial officer gives him his name, because he just says his name's Han, and the Imperial officer says, well, who are your people? He doesn't have any people, and the Imperial officer says, Han Solo. And I'm curious, how does everyone feel about this exchange? Because I think it's very divisive how he got his name in this canon.
I'm okay with it, but I would have preferred that he already had Solo as his last name and he just kind of said it proudly or something. But the fact that it was given to him by an Imperial officer doesn't bother me, and it's kind of in character for Han in the first place.
That's fair.
Yeah, it seems to make sense actually, because we actually immediately find out Han Solo is not this actualized man that we see in the original trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
And he so it sort of is funny. I agree, like David, it's probably, I guess, cool, more of a preference for him to just be like, I'm Solo. But I think it's a cool way to fit in. Oh, dude, an Imperial officer gave him the name Solo. He had no identity for himself. He didn't know himself. Cool. That's interesting to know about Han Solo. I think it's interesting. I think it's cool.
So I have a different take on that.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So for me,
that's
I
perfect.
feel like when it comes to an origin story for a character that's already been in a previous era or a previous iteration of a film, there's times where you explain things about the character that need to be explained or are cool to explain. This ain't one of them. Like, it'd be one thing if he was like a superhero and he had a name, and then he's like, okay, this is how he got a name, or this is how he got a nickname, like, because, but this, like it could have gone like David said, like this was always his name, that's what he went with. But I feel like if it was just going to be given in this way, he should have just like came up with it on the spot, like try to BS something, and then it would be like he was like Han Solo because he's buying something, and then the Imperial officer just kind of gives him a look, and it's just like, all right, Solo, just like not believing it.
Yeah, Chris, I'm actually with you on this one. It's not like, to me, it's not an egregious thing in the movie that I'm like, oh, I can't stand this. But I think it should, like, the dumbest thing I could think of is like, this should have been an Austin Danger Powers moment of it's just like, yeah, Han is like, yeah, Han Solo, and then like having an Imperial, like I think the scene works, like this exchange between him and the Imperial officer works, but it's like, there's no way your name is Solo. Who are your people? I have no people. It's Han Solo. And it's like, I would have preferred something along those lines. But again, it's not like, I have seen so many takes on this, just one interaction alone, that I'm like, it's not that big of a deal to me. But yeah, Chris, I'm definitely on board with you. Like, it's not my favorite thing.
I feel like if that ruined the movie for you, like some people will say, I'm just like, okay.
It's 3 seconds. Get over it.
Yeah.
Right. I think that he's probably thinking about his girlfriend who just got sold into sex slavery and is not thinking about his name, probably in that moment.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's actually room for a clever building of this character, this main protagonist. So it's sort of interesting. I didn't even care about thinking about this part, but I actually see how it works perfectly. If I was in his shoes, I'd be like, dude, my girlfriend is gonna get hurt a bunch,
Yeah, like
I'm not gonna be clever right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that's interesting, and I think I would have preferred if they kind of elaborated on that more, of like the trauma of, like, obviously Kira, we kind of do see the circumstances that she's been put in, and like the trauma that she's gone through with Dryden Voss, but also like there also the trauma of like not knowing if the one person you cared about and trusted is okay, and we really don't see a lot of it in this movie, and it's something I would have liked to have seen. But yeah, he basically gets into the Imperial military, and I think one thing that's really interesting to note about this is the Imperial propaganda that's playing the Imperial March in a major key. We hear the happy Imperial March of what's going on, and I think it's really, really interesting just having that, like, oh, I remember hearing someone on TikTok saying, like, what if this is like the fourth wall thing, where when the Imperial March is being played, that's what the inhabitants of the Star Wars universe hear, but us in the fourth wall hear it in the minor key. And I was like, oh, that's a neat take. Also, shout out to Darth Man. Hello there. What have we here? I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. Chris.
What's up?
Hello, what have we here?
Thanks for tuning in, Darth Man. I appreciate it. We are still at the beginning of the film, and this is a cheesy moment in the movie, but I absolutely love it. When the Imperial officer says, "We'll have you flying in no time," and it cuts to an explosion going off and Han flying through the air. I love that. It's super cheesy, but it's fun. And again, I think this movie does exude one thing, and that is fun. But I think it's an interesting moment, and we do see the Imperial Army, which we obviously see the stormtroopers a whole lot, but we don't really see battles from like a stormtrooper's point of view. And I think this is a really cool scene that like we didn't even get it in Rogue One. I think Rogue One feels more like a World War II movie. And this scene, not the movie, this scene feels very World War One. And it's a stark contrast. But I do love seeing like a very dangerous battle like through the stormtrooper perspective. It's very interesting, and it's like people are dying left and right, and it's like it's pretty brutal if you like just look in the background.
Yeah, it's good.
But we kind of move on from there. Lots of stuff kind of happens. As far as moving around, you see this group of people figuring out, and like, oh, well, we're passing on the rank. That makes you the ranking officer. We see this guy with a damaged piece of body armor. And they kind of get into it. And he's basically this guy is telling Han, you need to leave, don't worry about this. And it turns out that Han is smarter than he first appears, and starts to realize that this guy is not with the Empire. And he starts poking his nose where it shouldn't be. And then he eventually we find him encircled within a whole bunch of stormtroopers and Imperial captain or commander. And there is a back and forth, almost like a Full Metal Jacket type scene of Han speaks up, and then this guy kind of confronts him about it. And he says, Han says a very interesting line that I love. And it's their planet. We're the hostiles. Which I love that line because I think it really does show like there are not just Han by himself, but there have to be multitudes more stormtroopers, and the fact that we know so many defected from the Empire that have this mentality very early on into the Empire. Does anyone know when this movie takes place, like in the timeline?
Yes.
Yes.
So it starts in 13 BBY, and then after when you get to the Imperial part, it's 10 BBY.
10 BBY. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. So not that far off from like even the Clone Wars. Really, it's like not that far ahead. And it's like everything's falling apart very quickly, it seems, with the Empire. But yeah, does anyone have anything about just that line or kind of that interaction in general?
Yeah, it was great. I took one note. Good job, Anakin. Like, we're the you brought up Anakin. Good job. You facilitated this moment where this street rat could be like, "Yo, we're actually the problem. The government's the problem. What am I doing here?" And it's this cool, grounded, gritty representation of the Galactic Civil War and the desperate need to just get out and survive. And the awareness of like what I'm a part of is trash is just. I think it was the first time it's acknowledged in the sequence of the timeline of the films by just a normal person like that.
Yeah, I think so. Because we don't really, outside of like The Force Awakens, we don't really see, in the movies at least, Imperial defection. And even then, that's First Order defection, not Imperial defection. So it's very interesting that we do see this. I don't even think in Rogue One.
The pilot, but you don't actually see him defect.
Right. Yeah, he's just like, oh yeah, I left. But I feel like in the original trilogy, like you're like, oh yeah, I used to be in the Empire.
Yeah.
Or even people, you have Biggs, it was a deleted scene, but like went off to the Empire and then left.
People leaving the Republic in the Clone Wars, but that's Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And just after the interaction between Han and the officer, the imagery of Han walking against all of the other troopers.
Oh yeah.
Like that's the start of like the multiple amounts of imagery, musical cues, and nods that this movie has.
Yeah. There's one musical cue in this movie that's super late on, but I'm like, this is great. And he confronts this Imperial officer that he suspects is not. He sees hands kind of pull up some pants that, coming out of where hands shouldn't come out of, which I think is a good scene. It's one of those things I never actually, even though it's like even referenced in the movie, I never caught it until watching it this time. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a super weird thing to see. I was like, oh, it's just like, oh, he was wearing too big of pants. Obviously he stole the pants. I was like, oh no, that makes a lot of sense. But he basically confronts this officer and he's like, it's like, you got these two huge laser blasts in your chest armor. How are you walking around? And the guy is like, oh, that's funny. And then he turns on Han Solo. He's like, oh, you think you're going to turn me in for being this? I'm just going to turn you in as a deserter. And when this is the first of Tobias Beckett's betrayals, which is pretty much every moment in this movie is Thomas Beckett betraying everyone around him. And I think this is an interesting moment. This is right before we kind of Han gets in a lot of trouble. But is there any other like notes about kind of like the Beckett interaction or just pseudo meeting the crew?
I love
Yeah.
it, but that's not much of a comment. It's really nicely done, the whole section.
It's one of those moments where you're just like, where you wish the protagonist could be like, wait, no, don't speak, don't, just wait, look the situation over before you, and then they're like, ah, damn.
Darth Man also says, call them ditch troopers. It's a good name for these guys. They do have their own uniform, so they do get their own designation, and also Woody Harrelson at his finest. I like Woody Harrelson in this movie. I think he does a really good job playing Tobias Beckett. I think he's like one of those like perfect type, like his characterization of characters or acting and presentation of characters nails this part. But moving on in the movie, he is basically called a deserter, and like, oh well, here's how we deal with deserters, and they just throw him in a pit and let the Beast deal with him. And this is where we meet the Beast, and I love. This was probably one of my favorite fan service moments, if that makes sense. Of like, who is the Beast? Oh, this is how they bring in Chewbacca. And I really love just kind of like Chewbacca being this huge monster, and then having this like friendly interaction between Han and Chewie. I do love the introduction of Chewbacca. It's probably one of my favorite like prequel style moments of like how we get introduced to Obi-Wan in the prequels and how we get introduced to Anakin. Personal thing, how we get introduced to Chewbacca is like one of my favorite things, like as far as going back to reintroduce a character. I love how they did it. Because I think it is like a good way of showing how Wookiees were viewed post Republic, like after the Empire. It's just like them and Twi'leks were like slave species at this point. And I think it's a really interesting way of how they portray him in the first couple seconds and then humanize him pretty much immediately with Han speaking Worshik. Is that right? Shriwuk. And one of those cheesy moments that I find really endearing of like, this is really cute that Han Solo can speak it just a little bit. But yeah, how do you guys feel about the introduction of Chewie in this movie?
So I feel like if I didn't know the Legends meeting, then I would probably be just fine with it. Out of this one, it just makes me think like, okay, throughout the events of this movie, why does Chewie just stick with him? Because like the explanation is it's a life debt. And I feel like he doesn't really save Chewie in this one. They save each other versus, you know, like in Legends, you know, Han saved Chewie because he felt like he owed another Wookiee who saved his life. And Chewie had been captured and was being tortured, and Han saved him. And then they escaped. And so, like, that makes more sense of why Chewie has this life debt, which is a serious thing in Wookiee culture. But I do think it was like a hilarious moment where, you know, Han tries to speak Shriwook, and he's like, "Yeah, I speak it too." And it's like,
yeah, he's like, just a little. It's a cute moment. It's very goofy. It's very cheesy, but I'm like, this is kind of adorable.
It's all really cute.
Yeah,
it's all really cute.
I do wish
the whole
they,
entire interaction.
Yeah, I do wish they had expanded on why Chewie is in there, because why Chewie is in there is actually a really interesting story that they talk about in the novelization. And I wish, even if, like, you know, Han had asked, like, how did you get in here? And Chewie says it, and Han kind of like narrates it back to us. That would have been interesting.
Yeah, I definitely kind of agree. In the course of the movie, I don't think it does a great job of explaining why, because there are moments where Chewie could just walk away right here and right now. We know he does have a connection to the Jedi and the Republic previously. He doesn't really have a connection to smugglers and pirates. And I think it's one of those things. The one thing when I rewatched it this time, I was like, that I did notice as well. but all I could think of is I think a lot of people, and I don't think Chewie would be necessarily immune to this, is this sense of hopelessness that was kind of going on right now. And it's like, I don't have anywhere else right now. At this point, Kashyyyk is pretty much done for. And it's like, Chewie is a good character, and I think Chewie has always been a good judge of character, and he can see basically the good in Han, and is like, you know what? This guy's worth it to stay around. And that's all I can get. Like, I agree. It could have been a little bit better of like Han giving Chewie reasons to stick around with him, instead of just like, well, he's got to.
Is the life debt discussed in the original trilogy?
Mm-mm.
Like overtly?
No,
so in terms of the movies, then Disney's not worried about it being an issue then.
Yeah.
So it's just it's a deep fan criticism.
Well, it is in books, like for those movies specifically, like the supplemental material. But I do think with Chewie, what Chewie was doing before Solo was going around the galaxy and freeing any Wookiees he could find that were enslaved. Then he got betrayed by a bounty hunter, and that's what they say in the Solo novelization. I was like, cool, show me that.
Yeah.
The new novelizations have been doing a really good job of like, I wouldn't even say like correcting stuff, just more elaborating stuff and making what I would even just say just an interesting scene more interesting. Because I think, again,
like amplifying it and making it deeper.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good way of putting it, is just amplifying the already interesting scene. Because I do love this like meeting they have. I think it's like you said, it's super cute. It's very endearing. The shower, so good. So good. Of just like, oh yeah, of course Han would want to shower right after being thrown into mud and almost eaten and mauled by a Wookiee. And then the Wookiee joins him. And it's like, ah, yes, they're going to be friends forever. But yeah, so him and Chewie do escape by working together. And you're right, they save each other in this moment. And we see Beckett taking off and stealing an Imperial ship. And the crew kind of is like, a Wookiee could be helpful. And so they do stop and they pick up Han and Chewie. And we do get the shower scene, and we get the meeting, or them hanging out on the like underside of that ship and kind of talking, and they have the backboard like, they only took me because of you. And it's like, wait, no, they took you because of me. I think that's like a really good, cute way of kind of like starting off this friendship. But we are fully introduced to Beckett's crew, and they're very interesting, and there is like this connection you feel between Beckett and his crew, especially when they kind of land and they get to the campfire. They're all kind of having a good time, but they know what they have to do. They're going to have to do a heist, and they've kind of let Han and Chewie tag along. And there's a line that they say at this campfire while they're getting ready, and it's tribe or family. What's the difference? And there's a couple of good lines in this movie that happen throughout that I really like, and this is definitely one of them. And I think it just kind of encapsulates Star Wars as a whole, is this line. And I did really like just meeting this crew. I would like to see more of them at some point, whether it's like a show that kind of takes place earlier than between prequel and original trilogy. I think it would be cool to see Tobias Beckett and his crew, because what happens later, you said it earlier, is we lose them a little quickly. I love Rio. Rio's so cool. The way he flips all the switches with his feet in the ship is so funny to me. I'm like, yeah, this guy's a great pilot.
Planning his retirement.
Yeah. That like just those little interactions of like, oh yeah, this is what I'm gonna do. We're doing this huge heist. And this is really the first heist of the movie. Does anyone have anything like on the Beckett crew? Before we kind of get into
Well,
one of
but yeah, I couldn't agree more about tribe or family. What's the difference? I mean, ultimately, like everyone's family and your tribe is what you make it.
Mhm.
And like you said, Star Wars, it really is the motto for Star Wars, truly. You got the Sith tribe, you got the Separatist tribe, you got the Republic tribe, the Jedi tribe, you got the Tobias tribe, you got Millennium Falcon tribe. Take your pick, and it's really cool to see all the different little co-creations happening all over, with all the different individual characters, and they're all making their own little tribes, and most of the time none of them are blood relatives at all.
Yeah. I mean, we see this with Obi-Wan and Anakin. We see this with Han, Luke, and Leia, and we obviously the big one that has come out now is Rey. Like finding that family. When she had nothing. So yeah, it's I think super super cool that they kind of throw that in there, and I think they hit it really well in that scene at the campfire.
I love that scene.
It's like a scene you almost have to have in a movie like this, is like the campfire scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, this kind of transitions right into them doing the heist on Vantor. And I'll say this is one of my favorite train robbery scenes ever. I think the pacing of it is the sense of speed, the fact that this train is rotating, and it's no longer just like shooting people from train to train and jumping from train to train. It's like holding on to the top because the top is now the side.
Yeah.
I think the motion of this scene and the intensity, even just the little stuff of like Han and Chewie pulling off the couplings for the train cars, and like you see the effort and the struggle, and then later on we see this with Chewie doing it by himself and how hard it is even just for a Wookiee to do. So I really love this scene. I don't know how you guys feel about the train scene, but it's, for me, it's like peak Star Wars moment, but also peak movie moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like I was saying earlier, a Star Wars heist film, it's a gold mine. There's so much fun that you can have there, and I think this sort of exemplifies that. I do remember seeing the trailer where they end it with like Chewie about to get hit by a mountain, and then that's when they cut off the trainer. It's just like, all right, guys, we know Chewie's not about to die here. If you had shown like literally any other character besides Han and Chewie in there, we would be like, are they gonna die? Yeah, but Chewie, we're just like, he's fine. We see him in like the next 6 movies.
It's the burden of every prequel media of like, well, they're gonna be fine. It's always the subsequent characters you have to worry about. It's obviously the Beckett crew and Kira. Like, what's gonna happen to them? And
they're not going to market them because they're fresh, new, and no one knows.
Like,
no one has resonance with that.
But so they're doing this heist, and we meet a character and their crew, which since this movie came out has been one of the characters I wanted to see more of, and I love this character so much. We meet Enfys Nest. And we see this marauder gang, as Beckett's crew puts it. They're the pirates, and they have, I will say, the coolest speeder bikes in the history of Star Wars. The Enfys Nest speeders are so cool. And they, there's dialogue between Beckett and the crew of like, Enfys Nest isn't coming. Don't worry about it. Obviously, if they're saying something, we have no idea. It's not coming. They're gonna come. And the heist even more intense, other than just like they're fighting off stormtroopers on this train. Now off these this opposing gang that's also going for the coaxium that they're trying to grab. And I think this whole sequence is really interesting. The whole scene is just full of action that's really well paced. And as Enfys Nest gang is kind of interfering, they get onto the ship and they end up shooting Rio. And Han has to take over. And it's one of those things when this scene kind of takes that turn of Rio being shot. multiple times, and you see it's kind of like a graphic scene too. Like you just see like all these scorch marks, and you see like the muscle underneath.
Mhm.
And it's also kind of one of the themes with Han in this movie is like, is he the good guy or is he not? You know, or is he going to ever establish himself as the good guy? And I think just him watching Rio die in the ship, and his kind of like reaction of like, what have I gotten myself into? Like someone he's only known for basically a day or two. And it's like we see it kind of affect him. And I think that's really interesting. And I hate losing such an interesting character so early, or such a funny and enjoyable character to have around. We don't get enough of him. And
Mhm.
as the scene progresses, it takes a worse turn. And I am at a loss for the love interest of Beckett's name.
Val.
Val.
She realizes there's no other way for this mission to go. She has to set off the charges for the bridge, and she can't get off the bridge, or the train track bridge. And she tells Beckett it's been a hell of a ride, and she sacrifices herself to save the coaxium. And we have this moment of Chewie pulling off the coupling to at the very last second to knock off the train tracks, and then we're in this like tug of war
Mhm.
with Enfys Nest and Beckett's ship that he stole. And I don't know. It's like this is kind of like the whole of the train heist that ends in essentially a stalemate where they're trying to lift this train car and they can't get enough altitude. And it is a very big game of chicken between Enfys Nest and Beckett. And Beckett's like, they'll let go, don't let go, they'll let go. And then Han's like, I'm not going to let anyone die in this situation. And he lets go of the coaxium. And I just want to say the coaxium explosion in this movie is super underrated and underappreciated. It is so cool watching that thing explode.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the end of the heist scene. Like, does anyone have any other thoughts on the heist overall?
I don't think, especially Val, but I don't think that she had to die or Rio had to die necessarily. Felt like a little quick.
It's super quick.
Yeah.
So the actress for Val, Thandiwe Newton, she said in the original script there was no definitive death for her. That was only something they brought about during filming. Like in the original script, she was just going to fall, and it was just going to be ambiguous as to whether she came back or not. And we know in Star Wars, this is like, okay, if you don't really see them die, they can come back.
There's no fall
no
damage
one's ever
in Star
really
Wars.
gone. Right. So,
That's interesting.
yeah.
I would have liked to have seen, I would say, as much as I like Rio, like having like a loss on the mission, kind of like exemplifying how dangerous what they're doing is. But yeah,
That's what I was
losing
going to comment on. Yeah, it
losing
makes it so brooding.
both of them being gone is a little much to me. It was just one of the things, like, I don't think I noticed it until watching it this time, of like, we really don't get to know these characters that well. We get to know them a little bit, and what we do get is so great that you're just like, man, I wish we got more of them.
I agree with you guys, but I would have a question for you.
Mhm.
Would your feeling of wishing they were still there, or rather, did that feeling of wishing you could see more of Rio and whatever her name is, make like, did that make Hyde and Dross and Crimson Dawn and everything else that was about to happen feel more like, oh, this is heavier?
No, not for me. No.
I would say, and we'll kind of get to it once we beat Dryden Voss. There is a line he has about Val that I think makes his character better because she is gone. But I would sacrifice that because I think he's got a lot of great character building moments that having her survive, I would sacrifice that one line to have her be a continuing part of the story. Like, even if it was, I think it would make more sense for her than Rio, but I think losing one is fine. Losing both is like, I think we could have had a more interesting story having the other person and kind of having that middle ground between Han and Beckett. you know, being either Rio or Val and being like, no, we got to figure this out. Like, I'm loyal to you, Beckett, but Han is right type deal.
Yeah.
Interesting. What about you, David? Did their loss impact the transgression of the film?
No. Like I think Rio dying made more sense than Val dying. Like having Val there present would have been almost like a devil and angel on Beckett's shoulder, or even Han's. Like there would have been so many moments for that, and we don't have that.
Mhm.
To me, what it did was it made what's his name, Beckett, right? Tobias, yeah. It made him more of a, like, what's he gonna do? Is he gonna snap? You know, because like his only people in his life are dead, and now he has this rat kid and a Wookiee to hang out with. And to me, like, I think both routes are great, but I don't want to be too neutral. Like, I think that it did add to Beckett's unpredictability, really, honestly, because like if he had it Vi or whatever,
Val.
his anchor
Val.
his anchor there, like I think he would have been a little more calm, and like we would have been able to trust him more as viewers. But to me, what their deaths did, however, like I don't want that to happen. But to me, I was like, oh shit, this is serious business, because right off the bat, he's like this unpredictable, jaded dude who had all his plans ruined by these two strangers he doesn't know at all.
Yeah.
But I do think that, like, if we got, I don't think we'll get it, but if we got a side film or a side comic with that crew, that would be some really good content, because Rio and Val are super good characters.
Yeah, and I think what the purpose of losing both of them is, it does, like, you're kind of right, is they're the reason that Han and Chewie are on the ship, right? They were kind of that balancing act for Tobias, and when we lose them, it's all Tobias, and he's not the best person to make the decisions all the time. He needed those, like, kind of like guiding people in his life, and he no longer has them, and it obviously doesn't end up well for anyone from there on out. But also, I want to say Darth Man says that Tobias is more Hondo than Hondo. I'm a big Hondo fan.
Me too. I love Hondo.
I love Hondo. Hondo is, Star Wars doesn't always land humor in a way I think it tries to, but with Hondo, it's on point every time. I love him so much.
I do think two things on Val. I do think if she did live, she didn't want Han there. She didn't trust him. And so I do think if she'd lived, you would have had that kind of interaction on the next heist. And if she didn't trust Han, she's definitely not going to trust Lando. Yeah. So I think that would have been an interesting interaction. But even if you are going the route where she dies, I think leaving it ambiguous would have been very interesting for like a Solo 2, whereas, like, you know, because of Han, you know, Tobias is dead, Rio is dead, Val's lost everything. So then she's like gunning for Han in the next film.
That'd be cool. That'd be really cool to see, actually.
I think even
we saw an explosion, not a body.
Yeah, falling. Yeah, but people take explosion damage in Star Wars.
True, not fall damage.
Yeah, not fall damage.
Yeah. I think honestly, I think Solo 2, I think it's far-fetched that it will happen, but I think even at the end of the film, like Val coming back in that double cross at the end of the movie, like having Val be a part of that could have been very interesting. But we kind of move on, like, to move on from the heist and the loss of Val and Rio. We realized that it wasn't just a job to make money. It was that Tobias owed someone money. And I'm going to say this because you guys are more seasoned in some of this than I am. What was your reaction when Tobias says we owed Crimson Dawn? Because I had not watched the Clone Wars when this movie had come out. So Crimson Dawn, I knew, was a crime syndicate within the expanded universe, but I didn't know the connections it had to the Clone Wars.
I'll be honest. By the time I watched Solo, I had forgotten what Maul's syndicate was
Mm,
called. So
okay.
I mean, for me, well, the first thing was when Beckett said he owed someone, and I was like, "That's what we call foreshadowing, kids." Uh,
Mhm.
but then, with it being Crimson Dawn, I was like, "Oh, interesting. Okay, all right." Um, and then, I was just like, "Well, we'll see where it goes from there." And then, I was like, "Hey, that's a vision." It was like one of those moments where I was like, I wish you casted someone differently because I only see a robot now.
Yeah. I it was watching it this time and I was like, oh my god, I feel like I missed out almost not watching the Clone Wars and kind of seeing the Maul arc with Crimson Dawn. But it's something I think this movie does pretty interesting is it does bring a handful of things of the expanded universe into canon, like all at once in one movie. And I thought that was really cool, and it was cool for me because like I had known about Crimson Dawn just from that, and it was just one of those things like, oh wow, they're adding a bunch of stuff in. That's cool. But meeting Crimson Dawn, I think, was a totally different experience. This was one of my favorite scenes. I think of the movie is them on the Crimson Dawn yacht. Um, and there's a note here that says, "Keep your eyes down and walk slowly." Slowlo TM. Uh, that is I love that quote that Tobias gives him. Um, and this is where we meet Kira again, and we see that she is now working on this yacht in some capacity, and she says that she never escaped or she never left Corellia in a way, or never left that life in a way.
Mhm.
And I think this is a really cool interaction that they have, and it is like they want to do so much more, but there is like this like barrier between an invisible barrier between them in this scene. And just I don't know how was your reaction when
did Chase cut out?
Okay, I
Seems
thought it
like
was
it.
me.
Yeah, I was moving to see if it was me, and I just lost connection or something.
I don't. Let's see. That's interesting. We're still broadcasting, so I guess Chase's connection is not the host of that. Yeah, I noticed the indivisible wall too, big time. Just massive discord between them. Like she definitely had moved on, and I don't think so. Han was getting that at all. Yeah, it looks like Chase is gone. What did you guys think about that scene? Hopefully, Chase will be back like soon.
Yeah, watching that scene and it's just like, okay, for Kira to have survived for that long, she's become more than what she's letting on.
Hmm.
And so, we see that in like the very next scene, like interacting with Lando and everything like that. It's like, okay, Kira is not just like, the I don't know. She was never. I mean, we don't know much about her when we first meet her in the movie, but she's not a damsel in distress like this movie kind of like purports her to be with like Han. Like, oh, I need to go back and save her. So I think this is where we see like the character development for Kira, for where she goes not only in this movie but in other Star Wars projects.
Yeah, definitely. I still have to read her comics. I've only read some stuff where she makes like a quick appearance. But she becomes like a very interesting character in that sense. But when we first meet her, you do get that sense that she is not is she's holding back stuff. She's like the entire movie she's not telling Han some stuff until the end. Bunch of
Yeah, you said
notifications.
You said she's holding stuff back.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean it's like it's sort of uncomfortable, that scene, honestly, and I think it's done very well. But to me, it was like, oh, she's a part of this. All right, let's see where this goes.
Yeah, because
So
Han is living in this world where what he wants it to be, and Kira's taking the world as it is.
Mm-hmm.
good. Damn, that was a good breakdown. Because like honestly, she had no ability to get out of her situation, so that's all she can do, I think. And that's sometimes that just is unfortunate. So the servants. What do you guys think about the servants? Dryden Voss. I don't know. Yeah, I guess just the concept of the Crimson Dawn slaves in general, and the workers there, and all that, and
The
Dryden
ones
Voss
with,
himself.
like the half-head servants were creepy.
Yeah.
They're always creepy. But Dryden Voss, Chase brought it up earlier, and I believe Dryden was originally meant to be played by somebody else that was going to be like a lizard species.
Mm.
And then they brought in Paul Bettany instead. And I feel like Paul Bettany was like, no, I'm not going to wear all that lizard stuff. Just put a bunch of red lines on my face.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it was gonna be a Trandoshan. That would have been gnarly, like a live
Yeah.
action Trandoshan running the mall's operation. Pretty nuts.
Yeah, I know Dryden Voss, like he never really like intimidated me. It more seemed like he was like, you know how in some films where there's like, you know, like the criminal enterprise and he's just like the son that is sort of like inheriting the business, but he's, you know, like he's not his father, so he's like not the intimidating one. That's how I feel like Dryden Voss is. It's just like, yeah, okay, he's a threat, but I'm not getting like intimidated by
He's a
him.
baby.
Kind of like Hux, but with more power.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's totally Hux with more power.
Well, yeah, Hux with physical ability.
Yeah.
That's funny. She's surviving in a world she's full part of, and she's just not Han in the life.
Yeah.
I got that vibe too.
Mm-hmm. Because, well, we'll get to that part at the end of the movie, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Welcome back, Chase.
Well, thank you, Internet. Thank God for StreamYard, right?
It's well, you know what? I thought it was hooked. I thought your connection was responsible for bringing it to all the servers, but I guess
Whoever's next,
It's
I think
cool.
takes
it's
control.
cool. Yeah, well, I'm glad you're back.
Me too.
We discussed the servants. We're getting to Voss, and we talked about how Kira's situation.
Nice. Did you guys talk about Voss at all? Or are you talking about?
We just started short recently. Apparently, he might have been a Trandoshan in the original script or something like that. Reptilian
cannot-
species.
I cannot provide a source, but I know I read
Yeah.
that somewhere.
Okay.
I need a source, David. It's inadmissible in court otherwise. That's hearsay. I object.
What are have you guys have said it? I mean, what are your opinions on Dryden?
One of you said that he's an apt Hux, a more apt Hux.
Yes.
Yeah,
That
I
feeling.
see that.
Yeah,
was
he
funny.
doesn't intimidate me, but I was just like, okay, I can recognize that he's a threat.
I knew he had a master. I'll say that much. I knew he had a master.
Yes.
And I forgot who Crimson Dawn was run by when I watched this. So
And I don't
we'll
think,
talk about that.
unless I'm off, but I think that the Maul reveal was the first we saw of Maul running Crimson Dawn. I don't think we saw that before this.
Maybe that's why I
Well,
didn't. Maybe that's why I was unaware. I don't know.
In
I
Clone
thought it was
Wars.
just stupid.
Yeah, that's or was that
Was-
later?
Was
Was
the
it
last
announced?
season out afterwards? I don't
The
know.
last season the season 7 came out after
Crimson Dawn
Clone
happened-
Wars, but you still had season 5.
Right.
Yeah, season 5. Where
That's when he amassed his syndicates. He killed the Black Sun, right? In season 5 or 6.
well, part of the Black Sun, yeah.
Yeah, he took out the Black Sun and like he took over the Death Watch, and I think made a hodgepodge little mishmash thing of slap the name Crimson Dawn on it or something like that. Or was there never a name? Because I can't remember if I just was ignorant and forgot what he named his syndicate. Or are you saying there wasn't an established name by the time this movie came out, David?
Maybe I just forgot season 5 because I was fully surprised when I saw Darth Maul, and you know,
Me too.
I don't want to talk too much about Darth Maul because it's
Right.
I really like Dryden Voss. Again, I could tell he was not head honcho pretty much immediately. But I think what the actor did is he added so much tension in that scene that I thought was really good. And if he's good at anything, if Dryden Voss is good at anything, right, is creating that tension. And it's just like, who is he going to shoot and or stab now? Because it's like, is this where we lose Kira? Is this where we lose Tobias? You know, obviously we're not going to lose Han or Chewie, but Tobias or Kira could go right now. So I do like Tobias. I love his little stretch mark face things. Those are cool. But yeah, I mean, any other?
Is that skin or well, is that his skin print or is that scars? I never really decided. I just watched his face look like that.
On Wikipedia, he is listed as near human. He is not a human in the sense that Han and Luke and Leia are.
Yeah, I think as he got angrier, his those red marks got redder.
Yeah,
like that. Yeah.
Yep. I thought that was a cool touch. I like that. It was like, ooh, he meets business. But yeah, this. I mean, if anyone was steering the ship, I don't want to take control. If you guys were chucking along,
I have nothing to say as of now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're getting ready to get to the best part of the movie.
Best part of the movie, when Han, Kira, and Tobias and Chewie need a ship because they lost theirs, or they need a faster ship rather. They didn't lose. I don't think they don't lose the Imperial ship. We could have sold that.
Yeah.
But Kira basically says she knows a guy, and so we go to this other planet with a really sick game of BattleBots going on. I miss BattleBots. And we are introduced to everyone's favorite character from The Empire Strikes Back. We meet Lando Calrissian.
Yes, Landonus Balthazar Calrissian.
Chris, let's talk about this scene, because you're the biggest Lando person I think I've ever met. So just walk me through, like, what was it like? How did you feel? How do you feel now? Go for it.
So meeting Lando, as you see he's running the table. He's clearly like the one in charge there. He's sizing Han up. I think this is a fun meeting for them. I think in terms of, so if we're looking at ages, so Lando here is let me do quick math. I think he's 35. Wait. Yeah, he's like 34, 35, something like that. Mm-hmm. And because Han is 22. So, this is like this older, like more established, like, man, like sizing up, like, Han's not a kid, but, like this new kid on the scene, and you can see how he respects Kira, how he talks to Kira, how he even talks to Tobias and looks at Han. It's just like, yeah, okay. the grown-ups are talking. And to see how, Lando is teaching him lessons, whether Han realizes it at the time. It's nice. It's a different vibe than their Legends meeting, and which involved a lot more danger, but was also kind of funny, where Lando saved Han from Boba Fett, and I was just like, yeah, okay, I can dig this too.
Yeah. I love this scene. This movie, I think all of this, it's so stereotypical in what it is, but I think it does a really good job of it. Like, of course, in the heist movie, you got to have a poker game. Like, you got to have a high stakes poker game that someone's cheating in, whether it's the hero or the antagonist or one of the other characters. Someone's got to cheat. I love the way Lando cheats. He just has like the freaking Yu-Gi-Oh card dispenser. I love I love it. Yeah.
I definitely said to my brother in the theater when we saw it, I was like, it's time to duel.
Yeah, I think it's just funny all the that mixed it the Sabacc game. We know Lando is skewing his full Sabacc, and then you know that Han is stepping into a bunch of trouble, but they're both having this like look at me, like everyone in the whole entire cantina, even L3 has this massive, sense of identity, like amplified identity. And it's just a fun time. I like the Aura Singh reference.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
Again, coming off of this, and like Aura Singh was like a character that was just seen once in the Phantom Menace to me, and just not something that's always in the back of my head. And so until watching the Clone Wars, when Lando says, Tobias Beckett, you killed Aura Singh, and he's like, oh well, pushed is more accurate. The Fall killed her.
The Fall killed her, not.
I was like, oh my god, it's like the connections that you get in this movie like that, I think are really, really cool. But this scene in particular, I just think is like bursting with personality. Like everyone is at their A game. Like, Kira is sealing the deal. Lando is being Lando. Han is puffing at his chest, and Tobias is like, oh, just pushed her. It's okay. And then we meet L3, who is at a 10 at all times. So this scene is again, I think it fits the theme of the movie. It's just such a fun scene to be like witnessing.
Well, I think I like that you bring up the fun aspect of this film, because it's actually really like they do both. The context and the plot is actually very brooding. Like they could all just be killed cold if they mess up.
It's a high stakes film.
Any step of the way, and then it's like packed with all this. It's not lighthearted. It's good enjoyment. It's good filmmaking, and it moves at such a good flow, balanced. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, David.
One thing you were talking about, like the connections and stuff. I love all the connections, big or small. One of my favorite things is when Han is trying to like act like he doesn't know what Sabacc is. He's like, "What is this, Sabacc?"
Yeah.
And then Lando's like, anything Han, and that's why he pronounces it funny.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was a cute little tie-in, because like just how it plays out in the original trilogy. And I think there are lots of little breadcrumbs in here that they do really well, and have fun with like the little things from the characters we know. But this is right after this, once all is settled, right, between these characters, is we get to see the Millennium Falcon. And I remember in the theater this being a really cool moment of like Han seeing the Millennium Falcon for the first time, and how it does look a little bit different. It still has the full intact nose on it, but it was just a really cool moment. And it's like the fact that it's like in a mist in the shot of it's like we don't see it in like a full glory, but it's like I think it's a really cool moment. It's just like the fan service in this movie is coming out the wazoo, but I think it's done well, where it's like it's good fan service. I can't remember who on TikTok said
Tasteful.
Tasteful. I think it was Mandalorian said, like, I love fan service. I'm a fan and I love being serviced. And I do think this is like peak way to do a lot of fan service of it's just like the moments when we meet Chewie, it's fun. When we meet Lando, it's fun. And when we see the Millennium Falcon, it's fun. And all the little moments inside of the Falcon are really cool.
I think let me make this concise. I talked about Elden Ring with you, Chase. They have a character that's been in since Armored Core technically, but since Demon's Souls in Elden Ring. And it's like, yeah, I get it, and it was done tastefully. And the same thing can be said for Solo. Like it's all done so tastefully. I think when things are done, like in your face when it's like being spoon fed to you. That's the only time fan service is bad because that's just a cash grab.
Mhm.
But when it's done
Yeah.
tastefully, it's like Solo nails it. You know, when the music that's playing in this scene specifically, I remember hearing like a bunch of different elements that weren't just thrown together mindlessly for this song just to say, oh, this is like nostalgia factor. It actually sounded very well pieced and orchestrated together in a
Yeah.
way that felt new and fresh.
This most
So,
recent watch through, yeah, the music,
Couldn't
like
agree
I
more.
was very well aware, like, oh, they're using a lot of the original trilogy scores for this movie, but like the music really hit me on this watch through of like how perfectly
Yeah.
they put in a lot of, like, when we see the Millennium Falcon, when we go through the Maelstrom and all sorts of stuff, like they do really, really cool stuff with the music in this movie. But I do love, go ahead.
Have you talked, or Chase, you know who Xanthi Tan is? Star Wars Music Minute.
I don't, but I am going to be on the Podwans podcast talking about D Squad with her. So,
So they are doing. They're doing a they're going through Solo right now. So
Mhm.
what they do on their podcast is they go through the Star Wars movies 5 minutes at a time, looking at the music, sound design, and everything like that. So they're going through Solo right now.
That's cool.
And I know I talked to them. So we did this like Star Wars Music Madness like bracket challenge in March. And so I just talked with them. We talked about Solo for like 5 or 10 minutes with the music, but like definitely check that out.
Yeah, because it was this particular watch through, and we'll get to it later. But Enfys Nest's music
Yeah,
in this movie, I was like, damn, this is good.
it's very good.
But we'll shoot through the movie. The Falcon's booted, which is hilarious to me.
Mhm.
And just Tobias's line, like, yeah, I could take that off for 5%. And I was like, it's like these guys are all scumbags, like every single one of them, and they're like scumbaggingly more scumbagging each other throughout the movie.
Yep.
And I think it's great chemistry that we see a lot of the time.
And then one of my favorite lines from this movie: I don't like it, I don't agree with it, but I accept it.
Yeah, which is like peak Lando, right?
Mhm.
It's so good.
Also,
I'll
I need
do
that
it.
coat. I need that coat he's wearing in
That's
that
good.
scene. Like, you know,
That's
when
good.
it's like it shows a Falcon, you see like it's lighting up, and I was like, I need that coat.
You have something I want.
You have something I want.
But this kind of, they have decided they, in the meeting with Dryden Voss, like, we're going to go to Kessel. And honestly, even me hearing Kessel, like, ooh, I like where this movie's going. And so they take off in the Falcon and they're heading to Kessel. And it's a really small, short scene. We do get like some more interaction with Kira and Han making out and land on top of Lando's capes, which is
The disrespect to the capes.
But I do love Kira's lines, like, that's a lot of capes.
Mhm.
But this is something that I think is really, really cool. And there is one line in this that again, just watching this, I didn't even notice, is Han talking about his father when he's in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. And he's saying, my father built these ships. And it's something that's never mentioned or brought up. Like, Han doesn't really have a family or any connections in the original trilogy, but it's something that, like, it adds a lot to the character of Han. And like, at this point, the Millennium Falcon itself is a character of Star Wars. Like, it's just an iconic thing that happens, and we see it. We've now seen it in multiple iterations, from Solo to the original trilogy, and into the sequel trilogy. It's a huge staple of Star Wars. And I think seeing what's so cool to me is the difference between Lando's Falcon and Han's Falcon. Like, everything is super white and reflective.
I noticed that too.
In the Falcon when Lando owns it.
Yeah.
And when we fast forward to Han and Chewie having the Falcon in the original trilogy, everything is yellowed. The polish is off of the floor. and nothing ever works on the Falcon.
Have y'all read Last Shot by Daniel Jose Older? It's a
No.
companion novel to Solo, so it takes place before Solo with Lando and L3, after, like, right after Solo with Han, Chewie having the Falcon, and then like about 5 years after Return of the Jedi, in that quote unquote present day. And one of the things that it points out is, like, so you see Han, having the ship after Lando, and he's like, I don't see how anybody could live like this. Everything is so clean. This must be exhausting.
There is a one of the last Legends books, is one that is not well known as to my knowledge, and it's by James S.A. Corey, which is two people who wrote the Expanse series, and they also were like editors on Game of Thrones, I believe, or the Game of Thrones series as well. But they wrote a Han Solo book, and those two authors go super into detail when it comes to like ships and space stations and stuff like that. So it seems like it has a potential of just being a Millennium Falcon book, which I've kind of been interested in reading, because I'm not a big fan of the Han Solo trilogy from Legends. It's not my cup of tea, but I do want to read Last Shot. Like, everyone who's been talking about it is like, it is really good. I didn't know it was a companion novel to Solo, so that makes it more interesting. But yeah, kind of going on. I mean, does anyone have anything about the Falcon other than just like, it's just, I was on the best nostalgia trip when that whole sequence was going on.
I do remember when they first like announced it. I don't know if it was because of a toy or it was just a promotional image, and they showed the Falcon. I was just like, that's too clean. I don't like it. It sort of gave me like that uncanny valley sort of feeling, like, ooh. And then after like getting the context of like, okay, it's Lando keeps it pristine, I was like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. I do think just Han walking into the cockpit of the Falcon was, and I'll say this, is going from Han walking into the cockpit the first time, and then fast forward to The Force Awakens when the Falcon takes off without Han, and it's just Chewie and Rey. It's like, it is like this like really amazing arc of going from Solo through the original trilogy into The Force Awakens, just like the journey of the Falcon with Han. And I think it's like just a cool story in its own right.
Yeah, I see. For me, not the last, or when Chewie and Rey take off without him, but seeing Han walk into it for the first time, like in Force Awakens, because that was my first time seeing the Millennium Falcon in theaters, like on the big screen. So like that was a moment. And then Luke walking into it in The Last Jedi, and then going to like, Han walking into it. It was like happy moment, sad moment, happy moment. My emotions with this ship in 3 years.
As someone who was never really a big Han Solo fan, the most emotional thing for me in The Force Awakens was watching the Falcon take off without Han Solo. And I was like, this is hard to deal with right now. But the only other thing about the Falcon sequence is we kind of have this interaction between Tobias and Han, and kind of like how Han is starting to feel about this whole mission to Kessel versus how Tobias feels on it. And we do get like this very, very differencing of opinion of how things are going, not just on the mission, but for involved. And it's just interesting seeing these two different philosophies going on, which kind of comes back to if the crew had survived, like where this all would have gone without, now that they're gone, Tobias is really on his own calling the shots. But then we do get to Kessel, and I think Kessel looks really cool. I think the triangle mine was like super cool looking. I was like, it's just so Star Wars. Like, yeah, a quarry is circular, but in Star Wars, it's a triangle. We kind of see this plan go into effect where Kira is in charge, or pretending to be in charge, and Han and Chewie are prisoners or slaves that they're going to give to the Pikes. And again, kind of like tying into watching the Clone Wars and now Rebels, and then now Book of Boba Fett. Like, just the amount of stuff we're getting on the Pikes Syndicate's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I remember watching Clone Wars the first time, I was like, these guys they're not cool. Like, I don't like what they do, but as a race, they're really interesting. The headgear they have to wear and all of that. So yeah, the amount of Pike stuff we're getting is intriguing. Like, I wonder if they're building for some like a transgalactic Pike Syndicate takeover for a movie in the future. You know, like who knows? Like, it'd be interesting if they have a plan specifically for a film.
Yeah,
something bigger for the Pikes, because they're all over the place right now. Yeah.
With the First Order gone, you know, is it just going to be crime syndicates, or do we get Yuzong Vong or Grist takeover?
Grist are from the unknown regions, right?
Yeah,
no, Grist are the
Grist, they're in the unknown regions.
They're unknown regions.
Wait, so what's her name? Lady whatever is from the unknown.
Oh, that's different.
No, she's a Grindalid.
Grindalid. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Grist are from they're from the new Thrawn trilogy, the first new Thrawn. Second Thrawn trilogy is the best way I can put that.
Well, yeah, so I mean, it's likely then, because if the Pike Syndicate in the actual canon are a massive syndicate, they would need more presence before some post First Order.
Yeah. But yeah, this plan is going, and the one thing that is interesting about this thing is the plan goes into action very quickly. Like, it goes from like, we're gonna do this elaborate ruse to actually we're just gonna kill everyone here. But the one thing I will say is when Kira takes out the Pike, I guess, leader of this operation, and L3 is basically like, "Ooh, where'd you learn that?" And she just goes, "It's called Teräs Käsi." And I'm like, "Oh my god, I can't believe they said that." The worst PS1 game is finally canon.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, when did Teräs Käsi become? Where is that sourced from? PS1 game? Was that
PS1 game, and it showed up, or David will probably know, like, the first time.
I don't know exactly the first time. I just remember the references of Teräs Käsi, and then Star Wars Galaxies had it as like a job class.
Yeah. It was not my favorite.
It's a martial arts style?
Yeah.
It was one of those things I was like, oh, good. The terrible PS1 game's canon. Hor the Sand Person is now canon thanks to Solo.
That's
funny. But yeah, and the one thing that I took away from this whole scene is L3 removes the restraining bolt from the droid, and we get this ripple effect of liberation. Like, it just takes one person to be freed, and then just everything breaks loose, and everyone, like, from the droids to the people, and then onto the Wookiees, and it just starts this whole uprising, and it's just from L3 really just pulling off a restraining bolt. And I think it's like there's lots of allegory we could put into this whole little scene. I think it's such an interesting thing that you don't expect out of a movie like this that's all about like heists and card games and car chases. I think that was a really interesting moment. I don't know if anyone else like how the
L3 is more influential than Palpatine.
Yes.
So one thing about L3 that we haven't talked about is her and Lando's relationship. And I remember they, obviously they talk about it in the movie, but Lawrence Kasdan talked about it in an interview beforehand, and he was talking about how, like, this is pansexual representation. And I'm just like, okay, cishet white man. I don't think this is what you're like. You're trying to go for this, but it's just like, in a galaxy far, far away, if you are having any type of sex with any other species, I'm pretty sure that not all species look at gender the way we do, because even the way we're looking at gender now is evolving over the course of the past 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So I'm just like, don't stop.
On that note, I had it as a note and then I deleted it, but now I'm going to bring it up. The interaction between Kira and L3, and Kira's like, does that work? And then L3's like, oh, it does. And I'm like, oh, I hate it. I love it. I want to see it.
I was just like, all right, so they're making Lando Marlon Brando. because I don't know if y'all ever heard the interview of where they were talking to Richard Pryor's wife, and this came out a couple years ago, and apparently Richard Pryor and Marlon Brando had a thing going on, and Richard Pryor's one of his wives, because he had like 6, was just like, yeah, no, Marlon Brando, once he was on, I think it was like coke or something, like he'd fuck a mailbox, and I was just like, all right, so this is what we're going for.
Hey, you know,
Fine, you do you, but
different strokes, different folks, makes the world go round.
yeah, definitely different strokes.
Man, Lando and L3, what a great couple.
I don't care about Lando. L3's cool. She motivated an entire uprising that actually worked.
Yeah,
And
L3.
then she
Lando-
dies.
Rest
Hey,
in peace.
maybe Lando got inspired from his memories of L3 being a pushing beings to
revolutionary.
a revolutionary. Yeah, I don't like these words, leader, revolutionary, but she took off that restraining bolt, and then the thing was like mindless, can't think for itself, and she's like, I don't know, free your brethren, dingus, and then the whole thing happens. It's pretty cool. So maybe that's why he runs Cloud City, because he thinks about. Actually, there's that cyborg, right, with the
Lobot.
Lobot. I wonder if I mean, I don't care about those other theories, but I mean, maybe he got inspired to put that thing on that dude's head, Lobot's head, because of L3.
What's the ship name for Lobot and Lando?
Okay, so Lobot had that in his head, like the Empire put it there.
Yeah,
so he wasn't
that
all.
was a thing.
Yeah, but he was still mostly human.
So L3 would have liberated Lobot. L3
I don't think you
Lobot.
can. I don't think you
Yeah,
can. I
that
think
is
it
like
kills him
in
if
there.
you take it out.
Yeah.
It's in his brain. But he does sacrifice his humanity really to save Lando. So he becomes at that point more, at least by brain power, more machine than man. So it's just like another thing with Lando is like another companion that he had, his best friend, just sacrificed sort of themselves, their humanity for him.
Yeah, we see it with L3, and then there's lots of interesting Lobot stuff that happens in the expanded universe, and now I think they've even gone into it in canon at some point. So Lobot
L3
is
potentially inspired by Lobot.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I think it was
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would have been one thing to differentiate for having another non-human character as opposed to just having a younger Lobot in there, because he does meet Lobot not too long after that, or at least they become more regular partners not too long after that. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. But yeah, so from the uprising, and then I do kind of in this scene, we do see. I do think the one Chewie Han moment that really does do it is Han says, "Go free your people. If I see you, I see you." As in your people are more important than I am. And I do love that interaction. I do love watching Chewie free the Wookiees. It's a really good moment of the film, and it's followed by another good moment is when they kind of get out of the mines, and just seeing Han and Lando side by side just shooting the pikes down. I was like, this is cool. I love this. This is a great shot. It's fun. It's there's a lot of action going on. And then we obviously see L3 get gunned down, and we see a very vulnerable Lando, and he rushes to L3's side and starts pulling her, and then he gets shot and then process. And then we do see a really good team effort from pretty much everyone. I think Tobias helps in this effort as well.
Yeah, he puts the coaxium in the fuel line. Yeah.
And we do see just this camaraderie and this this one brief moment of camaraderie between everyone involved helping out. Chewie obviously comes back with the Wookiees. Yeah. And a lot is at stake here. And so they get everything on, they take off, and we get to, in my opinion, and I don't know how everyone feels, the best part of the movie. We get to see finally the Kessel Run.
Mhm.
And
We knew it was coming.
you gotta have it. Like, it's one of those things, like, you gotta meet Chewie, you gotta meet Lando. And one thing we did kind of gloss over is Beckett giving Han the DL-44.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That was cool. That was
The
a good
blaster?
another good fan service moment. Of how Han, Han just like, it's always like, it seems like there's lots of these little things that happen to Han that do become very important to him later on, and it's like one of the things, like, he, the little things do mean something to Han, and I think that's a really interesting aspect that this movie kind of built on. But the
He
Kessel,
seems very indifferent in the original trilogy.
yeah. But we kind of see these little things that are very much a big part of his character in the original trilogy, and we just get these kind of like sources for it, and just like in very interesting ways. And then, obviously he's like, he did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs, and seeing the Kessel Run, and then obviously just the ominous Star Destroyer when they're going through the Maelstrom, and all the TIEs chasing him, and Han is arrogant. Oh, they're not going to send a TIE fighter. They're not going to waste TIE fighters on us. Cue like 24 TIE fighters. And this is when it starts, and this is another moment of hearing the music from The Empire Strikes Back as they're running through the Maelstrom, and Han goes outside of the path, and we see this. We hear the music. We see this, and I think for something that's like something that is just a famous line of Star Wars, of like, I did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. Such a famous, just like, staple of Star Wars, and how they executed this scene, just the visuals, the TIEs chasing him down, even seeing Beckett on the gun and just being like, oh, okay, this is cool. And then they kind of get rid of the TIEs, and this is another really good chase scene, and then we get to the Maw. And I think the Maw is so cool, and the Maw Beast is one of my favorite monsters of all Star Wars. That thing is awesome looking. It's very Lovecraftian, that we don't really see a lot in Star Wars. I don't know. How does everyone feel about the Kessel Run? Was it all you?
It was well done.
Or more you wanted to see, or?
I think it hit every point, and you didn't get that kind of, like, when the beast opens its eyes in their face in the cockpit. You haven't seen that kind of jump scare since like the Phantom Menace. But then you see the scope and the scale of this thing; it's enormous. And then like Lando is just flabbergasted, like, "What? That's a living thing. I don't understand why it's out here." And that whole sequence was just I thought it was very well done.
I thought it was a beautiful scene. I personally didn't need to see it. Like, that could have been one thing that I was like, oh, like, that could have always been a mystery. But I think of the things that they explained that were referenced or mentioned in later Star Wars movies, or earlier Star Wars movies, technically, that I think that was probably the best. That was the well done. It looked beautiful. Like, the Maw of the Beast was great. I can't remember what the actual name of the creature is, but I thought that it was cool.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I would say it is one of my favorite, like, starship sequences in all of Star Wars. Like, I will always say the Battle of Endor is my favorite, like, starship thing ever. It's just so good. But the Kessel Run, like, is so good to me. And I think the way they kind of tie in, like, getting L3's memory core uploaded to the ship and the nav data was a nice touch, and how they kind of figured out. I also love, like, the really bad 1970s computer interface of the ship turning into the heading that will get them out of the Maw. And I was like, oh yeah, why do you have that animation on this ship for this one particular reason? I love it, but it's like, it's just cool, like, seeing that, like, nice 1970s, like, computer graphics. And then having the ship fail and hearing the, like, iconic hyperdrive has failed on the Millennium Falcon sound. And they're like, yes. And then obviously that huge boost once they have Tobias like inject some of the coaxium into the Falcon, and I think that was a cool little just like model of like, here's the Falcon's fusion reactor, and it's about to explode into like this red hyper fuel, and then it boosts out, and they get out of the maw, and I think that was a really cool like little exit scene.
I
yeah.
do want to, or sorry,
Go ahead. No.
I do want to say two quick things. So one of the droids that L3 inspires on there is in The Rise of Skywalker in the Citizens Fleet scene.
Really?
Yeah. So that was one of the people that Lando and Chewie like went to get in when they were rallying the galaxy. So I thought that was a cool touch.
That's cool. The Citizens Fleet is another one of my favorite Starship moments in Star Wars. I love that part.
And then the other thing is, so this kind of ties into the end, but with L3 being uploaded into the core, I do not see Lando just giving up the Falcon ever.
Yes, I see that. I definitely see that. I would never put it on a bet type deal. I totally get that. I think the moment is endearing. That L3 will always be a part of the Falcon, and I do think it kind of does tie in, into like Empire Strikes Back. Like, it's still his ship. Lando will always say it's his ship, and even at the end of the day in Rise of Skywalker, that's Lando's ship. But yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it's like it does make a little. It doesn't make a lot of sense that Lando was like, oh yeah, the droid I loved is a part of my ship. I'm gonna put that on the betting table.
Yeah.
But then they go to, what is the planet they go to refine the coaxium?
Savareen.
They go to Cabarine. They have a horrible landing, which is great. The Falcon is the best at horrible landings. And they start. They get the locals to help them refine the coaxium before they all explode. And there's a couple really good moments here. I think Kira has two really cool things. She basically says, I don't think it's cool. I think it's very ominous, but like true, even in like a real world sense, that's like very dark. She says, everyone serves someone. And I was like, oh, it's a sad but true statement in a way, especially in the Star Wars universe. And then she also tells Han that you are the good guy. And Han's like, no, I'm a smuggler, which I think is interesting, especially kind of how this scene kind of does turn out. But yeah, I mean, how does everyone feel? Because like I think there's a note here about Han being tough.
Yeah, I wrote that. I wrote Han tried being quote unquote tough, like his son Ben ends up doing, because I saw this massive parallel between Ben Solo's conflict trying to be this like dark edgelord Sith with Snoke, and Han's trying to be like a gangster smuggler tough guy. And it's like, of course, being a Sith and a smuggler tough guy macho dude are different, but like the core of them are the same exact thing. You know,
they want to
like
be
you're really in. Yeah, you want to be this tough dude. You want to be dangerous. You want to be edgy. And like, I thought that was fascinating to realize that today, that Han probably could look at Ben in the eyes on that bridge in Force Awakens and be like, I know what the fuck you're going. Sorry. I don't know if we're doing swearing on this, but I know what you're going through, dude. Like, I know what you're going through. I was not studying, death science, Force, theology, but hey, I tried to be tough too.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
I mean,
yeah,
do have that moment in The Force Awakens for sure, where he's trying to connect with his son because he has failed. But this, I think you're right. This is the one thing he really does have a connection to his son with, is like, I tried to be like you. We see this even in A New Hope of like, he was like, you know what, I got my credits, I'm out of here, and he couldn't do it. He came back.
Yeah.
And I think and we see this, with Kira, and their discussion and all that, and we see it with him. I think it's a really great parallel between the two of them. But yeah,
Yeah, and what you said about everyone serves someone, you noted that. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, like if people really look at their lives, there's at least something that they are
we have a boss,
under.
we have,
Yeah.
you have something, right?
Yeah.
There's, you got a landlord, right? But this is kind of when Enfys Nest makes her reappearance in this, and instead of starting with violence, she just takes off her helmet, and we do see that this person who had this really dark voice is a much younger person than we initially expected, and just has a face full of freckles, which I think is kind of funny, but I love it. And she basically just walks past Han and she says, I need a drink. And basically, we're going to talk this through, and we find out something that is very interesting, I think, once we have the background of Enfys Nest and her crew and what she is actually trying to accomplish in the galaxy at large. And you realize that Enfys Nest is the good guy in this movie. And this movie has been shot almost entirely from the perspective of the antagonist, from Han doing chases on Corellia, to him joining the Empire, to him joining pirates and working with a crime syndicate. This movie is entirely shot from the antagonist point of view. Han is obviously the hero, and we know where Han's story is going to go, but it is very interesting that they did decide, like, this is going to be the movie about the bad guys. But it is, again, it's fun, it's plucky, it's got lighthearted moments, but especially when you see Enfys Nest, you realize this is the bad guy side. This is the bad guy story.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I love seeing Enfys Nest in this capacity. I think it's really cool. It's like a switcheroo almost in the entire movie. How do you guys feel like Enfys Nest in this moment?
I like Enfys Nest as a character and a concept. I thought, her design is really cool. Like, that's one of the characters from this movie. I'm just like, okay, give me more. Like, give me the mini series for the comic run. Have her like the novelization goes into more like it shows what she does after, like what she does with the coaxium. But it was one of those things where it's like I wish we got more from her, because she's really only in the movie for two to three scenes. But I think the other thing, going back to what you said about Han always being the good guy, that's one of the things narratively I did not like.
Okay.
Because I did feel like from the get-go, with Han's like, oh, I'm going to come back for you. Like, Han was always the good guy and not the reluctant hero that became the good guy that we saw in his narrative arc in the original trilogy. So with him always being the good guy, then I feel like, okay, then we need to see what made him more reluctant. And I feel like that doesn't land as much for him to be reluctant, like to not trust Tobias. Okay, yeah, I get that, but not to be like, well, I'm just going to be in it for me and me alone.
Yeah, I mean, I do like his interaction with Enfys Nest in this scene, but it is very much like he does kind of like, yeah, I'm going to do the right thing right away with Enfys Nest.
Right. Kira wasn't talking. I mean, I took it as her. I personally took it as her saying his intentions are good. He doesn't. He's not a malevolent dude. Like,
right.
Most smugglers just don't give any care about any sentient life form at all. So I think it was more just Kira, and weirdly, never thought I'd take the time to defend Kira's statement, but I think she's just saying, like, he's good intentions. Like, dude, like, get over yourself. Like, you're not this tough dude who's like indifferent about the world. You actually care about other people. So I think it's a teeter-totter between, like, yeah, they could have made him a little more, I think you said reluctant or whatever, or something like that. Reluctant lawyer.
Yeah.
I see that too. Like, it would have been stronger to for his character progression in the original trilogy. But yeah, I mean, maybe you always choose to do the right thing would have been better words, because good guy does paint this picture of some heroic
Mhm.
thing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do love this scene and what we do get to see with Enfys Nest, and I think
Oh yeah, I didn't even
like,
get to talk about her. I love them.
yeah,
They're awesome.
it's one thing, like you said, she's in it like literally 2.5 scenes basically, but she makes such an impact on this film, like overall, and I think that's always like super cool to me.
Yeah.
But then we kind of move, you know, I do love this moment. We're kind of like glossing over this moment of Han trying to like bully Enfys Nest and be like, I got 30 hired guns and that ship right there. And then Lando just takes off.
Bye.
I love that moment. It's so good. It's another one of those things. It's like a lighthearted joke in a pretty serious situation that this movie, I think it sprinkles in those little funny bits really well. But they kind of have this conversation, like Han and Tobias have this conversation, and they kind of decide, we're gonna change the plan. We're gonna double cross Dryden Voss, and we're gonna deliver him basically nothing, and we're gonna help out Enfys Nest. And they do split ways, allegedly. And we then see Chewie, Han, and Kira making their way into the yacht that is already waiting for them. And they bring the coaxium up to Dryden Voss, and Dryden's like, "Oh, well, where's Tobias?" He's like, "Oh, he didn't make it." And it's very similarly to how Dryden reacts to Val not being there. He has the same reaction, this like very faux, compassionate reaction to Tobias not being there, even though it's a very different scenario in this scene. And I love how much Dryden Voss plays along with the game.
Mm-hmm.
He does the very like the mob boss of like, show me the merchandise. Let's see the merchandise. Like, you're not going to double cross me. Show me the merchandise. And I just love that. How did you do it? I was like, oh, well, it was really hard. He goes, no. How did you fake it? It looks exactly like the real thing. And I was like, oh, I love that moment with him. He's very slick, very suave in his like nefarious schemes, and I do like that about him. And then he basically reveals that, oh, Tobias told me, and Tobias comes in, and then they realize that the Crimson Dawn guards, or enforcers, I guess, are storming the village, and they open the crates. The crates are empty, and they pull off the masks of what they think is Enfys Nest, and it's just the villagers in Enfys Nest uniforms. And we get the best music from this movie is Enfys Nest jumping from the top of a building with her weapon and just dive bombing onto the enforcers. And that music in that moment is like so perfect. I love it so much. Does anyone have any comments on this whole sequence?
I think every time I watch that sequence when Dryden knows it's a fake, I'm like, man, what if he was more volatile in that moment and just decided to smash one? Like, this is a fake. That entire room would have been vaporized.
Yeah. That would have been funny.
That'd be a fun fan edit right there. Credit roll.
But yeah, this is my favorite piece of music for sure. And I think that the shot from behind of Enfys Nest jumping off of the building to stab the Crimson Dawn enforcer, like, I think it's a great shot. And I think it's a cool sequence. And I love when they switch back to the ship of Crimson Dawn, and they're just like, and then Tobias is like, "Oh, I have to figure this out now."
Yeah, his quick little two blaster betray Dryden, really nice.
Yeah, I did love like the DL-44 cut out into the bottom, and then they obviously figure that out later.
I noticed that for the first time today.
Yeah, it was a cute touch. But Tobias leaves, and it's now a fight between Kira, Han, and Dryden Voss. They try, and Dryden tries to be smooth. It doesn't work out. Kira looks like she's about to turn on Han, but then turns on Dryden Voss. And the way she kills Dryden Voss is so cool. She sticks his little double dagger into her forked sword and just hammers it into his chest.
Yeah, it is a hammer, isn't it?
It is so cool. So that's the end of Dryden Voss. Rest in peace, Dryden Voss. And Kira tells Han that he needs to go, and she'll be right behind him. And this is when we get the reveal of that she is actually working with Crimson Dawn full time, and we see her use the ring that came off of Dryden Voss's finger to contact the leader of Crimson Dawn, who turns out to be Darth Maul. I am currently watching Rebels, and I've just gotten to like the second to last episode of season 2 where we meet Old Master Maul, and I'm like, oh man, I am enjoying a lot of the Maul content we have gotten. I hate Spider Maul with a burning passion. But I do love all the Maul stuff. I loved seeing Maul in Solo. It does mean that we do get a lightsaber in Solo, even if it's just for 2 seconds, so it doesn't count as a lightsaberless movie, which I'm still waiting for. But I love this, and kind of like how Kira's not out of it at all. This changes this one brief moment, like changes her character completely. I mean, how did you guys react when you saw Maul in the movie? Like, I don't think anyone expected him in this movie in particular.
The funniest thing was hearing people in my theater go, "Wait, he died." That was funny. I wasn't moved either way because, you know, obviously, like, I had seen Rebels and everything, and I was like, huh. And then when they said it was Ray Park, and I was like, oh, yay, Ray Park, good for him. And then, like, with Sam Witwer's voice. So that, you know, it being Crimson Dawn didn't really, or Maul being Crimson Dawn didn't really move the needle for me. Just because I was just like, okay. At that point, like, we knew what happens with Maul, so we were just like, okay, so this is what happened. This is where he was before Rebels. Okay, now what? What happened next?
David, how was your reaction?
So mine was much the same as Chris's. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I was pretty hyped for it a little bit, but one part that actually made me laugh is when, like, he called his lightsaber to him for literally nothing.
Yes,
just to call it to him, activate it, and then the little bit of Duel of the Fates played in the background when he did it. And they actually, the director, or one of them, was debating between either using Maul or Darth Vader, and he went with Maul because he felt Maul would connect more with, like, the younger fans, or like his one of his kids, I think.
Okay, Roddy, what was your reaction when you first saw Maul in Solo?
Well, I felt it coming as the scene approached. I didn't know exactly that it was going to be Maul, but I was like, oh, it's one of the bad.
One of the big bads.
It's definitely going to be one of the familiar bad guys, you know. So
that's fair.
I was like, but I didn't know it was Maul. I was like, oh, this is big, and I was like, oh shit, wow. And I loved seeing old aged live action Maul, because like disgruntled, nihilistic, angry Clone Wars and Rebels Maul, that was cool, but like this was really well done, and also really, yeah, I think my notes on the comments come after, but yeah, seeing Maul was wild. Yeah, first time it was wild. Today it was like, good movie.
Yeah. I knew Maul, like you said, like, oh, people like, oh, I thought he died. I knew Maul was alive. I knew of the Spider Maul. I had not seen the Spider Maul when this first came out. But it was interesting. I was like, oh, yeah, I guess that dude still is kicking. All right. But yeah, so at the basically the end of this movie, we see Han kind of back on the planet, and he confronts Tobias, who's leading Chewie out, potentially to his death. We don't know. And Han confronts him, and they have a quick exchange of words, and then Han shoots him. And I think it's really interesting because Han shoots first in this, and I think that was very deliberate. That basically mid sentence with Beckett, Han shoots him, kind of proving that maybe he is not this good guy that I think Kira was trying to lead on to. Still is the good guy. He's still at the end of the day helping out Enfys Nest, kind of help out the rest of the galaxy, or more specifically, basically the rebellion. At the end of the day, right, with Enfys Nest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, go ahead.
So they give the coaxium to Saw Gerrera. You find that out in the novelization. So Enfys Nest meets Saw and a young Jyn Erso. And her and Jyn have a nice little interaction because Enfys Nest takes off her helmet. So it's showing like Jyn, like, I'm a young girl. Obviously, you're a little girl at this point.
That is awesome.
And they, they have a conversation about being, what's the word I'm looking for? Underestimated by their opinion and everything like that. And, so I was like, that's cool.
That's super cool. The one thing I was thinking of with this, and you guys have...
I love that.
Yeah, you guys have caught up on High Republic. I have not. This, all I could think of when I was looking at their costumes, especially the close up on Enfys Nest, is this did the Nile go good? Because that's all I could think of with them is they look like the good version of the Nile.
We got 200 years to find out what happened with the Nile. So
I was like, with the masks and the armor they're wearing, I'm like, this is very Nile-esque. But
well, that would make sense then, because aren't they enemies of the Republic? So if the Republic transitions to Empire, they're still not going to like the state, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that your thought process?
Kind of. It was just it's very interesting that again, like Chris said, we got 200 years with the Nile to figure stuff out, and it makes me wonder: did it turn into what we see in Solo? Probably not. That is literally just my brain going haywire.
Yeah,
but
just seeing cool little
but
things that look similar, but who knows?
Yeah, we do have Enfys say to Han, maybe someday you'll feel different when it comes to all that. And that really, just that one line really does set up Han for the original trilogy. And more specifically, A New Hope. Is that his smuggling ways and pirating ways are eventually going to change, and they do. And I do love that line from Enfys. This whole sequence I think is really good. This is where the movie I do think does slow down right at the end, because this movie again is always in motion, and then it does slow down here. I think a lot of people have complained about it, as it is this wild ride, and then it just kind of comes to a screeching halt in this section. But does anyone else have any thoughts on this whole?
Yeah, I think that's cool. First of all, I think that's a cool stylistic thing sometimes. But I would say, to touch on maybe someday you'll feel different. I think right now Han was coming into a better understanding of, not only himself, but inherently the world too, and how stuff actually works. And he did clearly learn from Tobias and the whole situation. And I think he melded his own understanding of caring about people he cares about, and being a smuggler, but also not being a trash person.
Yes,
melding that with what he learned from. What was that?
There's a path he could have chosen. He could have been like Tobias, and he deliberately chooses not to be like Tobias.
Exactly. I think he took his own understandings, which are pretty great, but I think he did listen to Tobias though, because in my understanding, he learned a little bit of humility, security, and discernment from this whole film. Watching the utter chaos of what happened as a byproduct of his actions and who he chose to be with, And also just straight up what happened with Tobias and like how he had to watch his ass throughout the film with Crimson Dawn. And I don't really know if Han was thinking that like precisely. So that's what I saw happen to him, and I think it's cool that Enfys says maybe Cindy will be different, because right now he's on the verge of becoming more rugged and more like streetwise. And when you're like so insanely streetwise like Han is in A New Hope, you say stuff like, "The Force isn't real, kid. Get over yourself," and just survive. Like, so it's really cool to see Enfys say that when he's about to start becoming the Han we know about. And I think the Han we know has some good skills. If my honest opinion is, any Jedi would, if they understood like a little bit more, I mean, actually Jedi do understand that, but I think Han has a lot of good strong suits, and just because he becomes this like sometimes toxically egotistical individual, he has so many skills that are like really force wielding powers. He's like, look at the Kessel Run segment.
Yeah,
a lot of things. So
I think a lot of Jedi pilots would be hard pressed to do the Kessel Run. But yeah, I mean, he hates flying. Flying's for droids, like L3. But yeah, this leads us to the end of the film, where we do see Lando Calrissian back at the card table with a huge pile of credits and collections of things he's winning, and Han and Chewie confront him again. We get a nice tense moment, and then they hug, and Han steals the cheater card from Lando. And he bets the coaxium, or the gas money that he has owed so many people, against Lando for the ship. And I think this last little interaction with Lando is really good. I think it solidifies kind of their relationship moving forward. Of like, they will always be double crossing each other, but not in the worst way. I mean, Lando kind of screws him over really bad in Empire Strikes Back, but he does not. He's got a plan.
If anybody does anybody dirty in that movie, it's Han doing Lando dirty, because if Han doesn't go there, the Empire's not going to go there. So Lando has to weigh Han's life versus all his people on Cloud City. He doesn't do them dirty.
Do you know who's actually to blame, since the Empire is the biggest transgressor here? The failures made in the Republic.
It's all
Anakin's Jar Jar. Fault. It's Jar Jar Binks' fault for giving Chancellor Palpatine the emergency powers.
Dello Feligates.
That was good.
But yes, I do love the end of this, and then Han and Chewie get the Falcon back. And I do love the last shot of them pushing the throttle together to go into light speed. I love that final shot. It's so good. But that's the end of the movie. We'll go around real quick and do kind of a quick summary, kind of like how we felt after our most recent watch through, or how you feel after this, after talking it out. I'll start with David. How do you feel now you've watched it again? How do you feel about the movie overall?
One of the small things that dawned on me, like just now at the end of the film, especially, and when he's turning, I didn't realize that the Falcon actually had a steering contraption. I thought it was just dials and stuff. I'm like, how is he flying with just a control board? And now it makes a lot more sense seeing that.
Yeah. I thought it would be more like a yoke, like a TIE fighter, but the steering wheel is kind of funny. It makes Spaceballs make a lot more sense with the R group.
Yeah.
Roddy, what are your thoughts like after rewatching this movie?
I think it's very significant to me, because it's a very good portrayal of the importance of with Kira and her like literally utterly trapped life situation. she could have still made some choices to get out of it. Or let's be honest, And then Han and Han, I'm gonna say Lando, and I guess even what's his name, Tobias, like their utter freedom in like jumping into chaotic situations just to be
Yeah.
smugglers. It's like it's a cool take on
Yeah.
where you're
I
gonna place
think
yourself,
that-
and I know that's so all encompassing, but I really have a deeper appreciation for the movie
Mhm.
after
Yeah.
watching this.
I,
do.
th- I think I think the paths that Tobias and Han choose. Obviously, Tobias doesn't have any paths left to choose. Thanks to Han.
He created
but
it.
Yeah, they make their own decisions and they live with them. And I think I do like I think there are lots of things that the characterization of Han in the original trilogy could have maybe been built on a little bit more. We do get those little details that are built out really well.
I
But
agree.
yeah, kind of like what Chris said in the very, very beginning of like, how do we get from Solo to like the original trilogy? Maybe not the best, kind of even with the name Solo. But every time I watch
That's
this movie, I
cool.
do like it. It creeps up in my rankings a little bit more every time I watch it. But Chris, after talking about it for almost 2.5 hours, sorry, these things go a little late. I know it's been a minute, like a month or so since you watched it, but last thoughts on the movie.
I still maintain that it should have been a Lando movie.
That's fair.
I do think, looking at it, I'm still kind of hard pressed to see why Han would think like, "Hey, I'm gonna go see Lando when I like have nowhere else to go, with Empire breathing down my neck," and thinking like, "Oh yeah, I can trust this guy." I don't think we got that really set up, but then we have 13 years in between. So there's more story to be told, but it's also just like, I feel like all these important things that happened to Han happened to him within 3 years, and he still has a whole other decade to go before we meet him in A New Hope. And it's just like, all right, we put him in touch with Jabba at the end of this movie, so he's already set to go. So it's just kind of like, you could have spaced things out a bit more. Like, not everything had to happen here.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I like those points because it did market itself as like an origin story and character building story with a little more focus on Han Solo. But I guess I mean we can't get everything we want. But that's fair. I agree with both. It's sort of weird. I think a lot happened. I have no words actually.
Let me ask you this, Chris, and I'll pass it on to everyone. Do you think this show would have worked? I mean, do you think this movie would have worked better as a show? Like, not as a slight against the movie. I love the movie, but do you think we could have gotten more, like you said, more spaced out content? This movie could have, or as a series, it could have taken place over the course of 10 years instead of 3 years.
I think give it 3 or 4 seasons where you have that first season be Han, like Kira, and then being in the Empire, maybe show like him in an episode with the Academy, and then a few episodes with him with the war, and then like end the season with him meeting Tobias and the crew. And then that next season is him with Tobias and the crew going through like sort of that Crimson Dawn interaction that we see in the latter half of the movie. And then the next season you do like, okay, him meeting up with Lando again, him working with Jabba, meeting Boba Fett, those kind of interactions. And I think that would also do a better job of endearing Alden to the audience and gives him more time to sort of like get into the role. Because that was another thing that was a disconnect with this movie. Like, people, liked Emilia Clarke as Kira. They liked Woody Harrelson as Tobias Beck, Donald Glover as Lando. But if there was one person that like people picked on the most, it was Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo. And there could be portions of that where it's like, oh, I only see Harrison Ford as that. And this also could be a part where it's like, for me, Alden didn't hit. So I think that would have been a better job of him getting like comfortable into the role and everything like that. And it'll also give him more time to, like I said, endear himself to the audience.
Yeah. I will say I do like Alden in this movie. I think he does I think a lot of his mannerisms and how he carries himself in the movie very Han Solo. It took, I can't remember if I mentioned this, but it took me until the end of the movie of like, he's not emulating Harrison Ford. Who is he emulating? I noticed it was like it sounds like he's almost trying to be Jack Nicholson in a lot of these sequences. But I think you're right. If we would have given him like a show to grow into the role of Han Solo, I think it would have worked really well. But I think you're right. Like Donald Glover nailed it as soon as we saw him on screen. Emilia Clarke nailed it. Woody Harrelson nailed it as soon as we see them. And I think as the film goes on, at least me personally, I was like, yeah, I think he does grow into the role a little bit as the movie progresses, but it's not like we see him in that first car chase and like, yeah, that's Han Solo. And I think those are big shoes to fill at the end of the day. Excuse me, but yeah, I think I agree with you. But what about you, David? Show or is it fine as a movie?
I think it would have been good as a show as long as that show was longer than 6 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it was multiple seasons or even just a 10-episode show, they could have covered a whole lot more than the movie did. I don't dislike the movie, but I think that the show would have pleased a broader audience.
Yeah, I agree with that. What about you, Roddy? Show would it have been better as a show, or should it stay a movie?
Honestly, it's going to be a weird answer. I think every movie would be better as a show because of the simple fact that a longer format lets you have more stuff. So I don't have any complaints, but I do think that every single thing that's a movie would be better as a show.
Mm-hmm.
Just by principle.
Yeah, I think that the longer format tells a longer, better story, but at the same time, like there is something nice and magical about a movie. I think what we got, I personally think was great. It's a great adventure. It's 2 hours and it's a fun 2 hours to sit through. And also it's also just the most easily accessible way to portray a story. Like you just got to sit here for 2 hours and then story's done versus you got to spend a whole day binging or weeks at a time watching a show.
A lot of people don't even watch shows.
Yeah. A lot of people drop off. Like even Mandalorian, people who are like, oh yeah, I watched Mandalorian the first season. I didn't get around to the second season. You hear that a lot. Same with, Clone Wars, we can get into the Clone Wars in another episode. But yeah, like that's a hard show to get through, at least in the beginning. But yeah, I like it as a movie, but yeah, I would love to just have more of that elaboration. Chris, like you said, like let him grow into that role and kind of like build into it. And I think would have been really awesome to see. But that's going to kind of wrap it up for this show. I want to thank Chris, first of all, you for sticking around and talking about this. You were the perfect person to talk about this. I was joking with Brandon or Darth Chaco about he's got the dyad and then we're the triad, because when the three of us are talking about a show, it's just agreeing with each other the whole time. And it's such a relief to have like a different perspective and someone to just kind of counteract any opinions and just have, even if it's not a discerning opinion, just like a different perspective. So I do appreciate you being on here and kind of
diversity and contrast is important.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
But Chris, where can we find you?
You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitch at Star Wars Lawyer, all one word. And you can find me on Twitter at Chris_SWL.
Nice. David, where can we find you?
Xanatos1138 on TikTok, Twitter, pretty much anywhere social media is, that is my name.
Awesome. And Roddy, where can we best find you?
Higo27 on YouTube. I have 2 videos. There will be more sometime.
Nice. I'm the same as Xanatos Ford in the Black, literally everywhere you can find. Most of my content is on TikTok, and you'll see us here, I believe, in 2 weeks. And then I am super excited for every first Sunday except for this one. WrestleMania came up, so we push it. It's fine. Priorities. I've got a long ride to do on one of these Sundays, so we'll have to push one back. But Rogue One is next. I am excited about that. Be prepared for like an 8-hour episode.
I know, right? I have
there's
too much
so
to say about that
talk
movie.
about in that movie.
And
I got a lot more out of Solo watching it this time than I thought I would. So I'm very relieved about that. But Rogue One, it's a lot to unpack in that movie. So please stay tuned. First Sunday of every month, we will be going through a new Star Wars movie, and Rogue One is next. So thank you for everyone who's watching. Thanks, Darth Man, for hanging out. And thanks. Sorry about internet connections earlier. My bad. I'll tell Spectrum.
you'll have to rate how we did without your hosting.
I'll go back and watch it, and I'm sure it was fine. You guys are great. But as I guess all the Star Wars podcasts end, for Light and for Life, we are all the Republic, and may the Force be with you.